Hello, this is Michel Leviathan Sorbet and you are watching a new episode on the Wojennik TV YouTube channel. Today a continuation of our HEXplore saga, because I would like to present you a review of the Forests of Adrimon. I have already presented a review of the new edition of the Valley of the Dead King, then of the expansion, so the Return to the Valley of the Dead King, and today a review of the Forests of Adrimon. The Forests of Adrimon were published thanks to a successful Kickstarter campaign, which enabled Mariucci Designs, the publisher of this title, to publish both the new game, so the Forests of Adrimon, alongside with its expansion, the Return to the Forests of Adrimon, and also a second edition of the first opus in this series, the Valley of the Dead King, with an expansion, the Return to the Valley of the Dead King. So here we have 4 titles, 4 boxes, and each of them will be reviewed on our channel. Today a review of the Forests of Adrimon. What is HEXplore? HEXplore is a game system designed by Jonathan Mariucci, Nathan Loss and Kat Kimundri, which is a cooperative adventure game in which 1 to 6 players will create, develop and prepare their heroes, living some adventures, acquiring some gears, some equipment, to a final battle, to a final struggle against a very strong opponent. In the first part of the series it was the Dead King. Here in the Forests of Adrimon it will be Adrimon, a powerful magi who controls a forest in which many creatures lived. We had cities, we had populations, we had animals. All of them are now controlled by Adrimon, which is a villain, who is a bad magi. She will have her own citadel, to which we will have to travel at the game's end in order to defeat her. The game, as I said, was published by Mariucci Designs. It is designed to be played both solo and in a group of 2 to 6 people. The minimum age of a player is 12-13 years up, because it's a cooperative game. Not every player will have to be able to read English, because it's a game published in English, but because it's a cooperative game, only 1 or 2 players can know this language in order to play smoothly in a group. The time of play is very different. It can be very different, because we can end the game even in under 2 hours, but we can also play 4 or 5 hours. It all depends on the way that the story evolves. It depends on the missions accomplished, on the equipment acquired, and sometimes it depends also on luck, because we will be rolling a lot of dice in the Forests of Adrimon. Now I would like to start with a presentation of the components of this game, then I would like to explain you how this game works, and at the video's end I would like to give you my opinions about this title. So let's begin. Here are the elements which are enclosed in the box of the Forests of Adrimon. The game had been set and it already begun. Now let's take a brief look at all those magnificent components. So I will try to explain you what we receive in this box and what is the purpose of each of those components. Well, the first one and most obvious component are the playing tiles. Each time before gameplay begins, we will have to construct the world in which we will live our adventure. You can use the 4 starter tiles to create the standard setup. The standard setup will be composed of the 4 big tiles placed one next to the other. A, B, C and D. But it is absolutely possible to mix those tiles, to arrange them in a different way, or to use also the smaller tiles which are normally hidden and require exploration. But it's absolutely possible to create different starting worlds. Now each of those tiles, as you can see, is being is a tile on which we can see hexes, and on those hexes different terrain features. We have some woods, we have some big trees, some mountains, we have some paths, rivers, we have some battle sites, we have some enthralled cities, we have some boss locations, etc, etc. Now the most of the standard tiles and the type of terrain on them has no impact on gameplay, but all the special hexes are of a great importance, and each of them will be a specific one and will have different purposes. Now the world, as I said, is being composed of hex tiles of different shapes. The starting tiles are always present in the game unless you decide not to use some of them. Why not? The others require to be explored, and this is the reason why you receive a stack of those tiles. Each time you are eligible to look at a new tile and to place it to add it to the world, you just grab a tile and you can add it where your characters are being present. Now, as you can see, those tiles also have some terrain features. Each of them has a letter, which is very important, and also some special hexes. Now, the tile name is important because to those tiles will be associated some missions called in this opus of the HEXplore saga destinations. Destinations will be drawn from a special deck of cards, from the destination deck of cards, and each of those missions, each of those destinations will have also a corresponding letter on it, indicating on which tile such a destination, such a quest, such a mission can be accomplished. Each such a card has a narrative description and the information how to accomplish it. It has also the information where such a mission should be accomplished. We can use a dedicated token to indicate the location of such a destination on the playing map, and additional information also about what skills will be required to accomplish such a mission, with also an information what additional treasures or benefits you can receive while accomplishing such a mission. Apart the big tiles, apart the smaller tiles, you also receive small hex tiles, which can be used to create additional starting worlds, or you can also expand your world using such small tiles. It's up to you. Now, I already started to explain how the cards work, so I will now briefly explain what types of cards we receive in this part of HEXplore. I have already shown you the destination deck of cards. We also receive another new deck of cards which was absent in the first opus in the Valley of the Dead King. It is the fragment deck. Now, the purpose in this part of the HEXplore saga is to kill Adrimon, is to destroy Adrimon in order to free all the people who lived in her forest from her chains. In order to do this, we have to prepare for such a battle, and we will try by accomplishing destinations, so quests, missions, to gather fragments of relics. Those relics had been shattered a long time ago, but they can be reconstructed using the parts which are somewhere in the world. They are scattered around the game map, and we have to collect them. As you can see, there are several relics. We have the staff, we have the sword, the figurine, the shield, and each time we acquire a relic fragment card, we draw a card from this stack of cards in order to see what type of relic this fragment is associated to. We can also receive some benefits. If we manage to gather all three parts of a relic, we can reconstruct it on a battle site. If we do, we can obtain this relic, and those cards are the most powerful cards in the entire game. Not only they grant a special benefit during gameplay while facing standard enemies, they grant also an additional bonus while facing Adrimon the Magi. But it's not very easy, because first of all you have to gather all the 3 parts of such a relic, then you have to travel to a battle site which can be guarded by a sentinel, and finally you have to also meet the requirement in order to forge and then to wield such a relic. If you do, you also will receive a fantastic bonus to one of your stats. So it's absolutely worth to reconstruct those relics, because they grant huge benefits during the final battle against Adrimon. A well-known deck of cards, which is pretty much the same that we had in the Valley of the King, is the power-up deck. The power-up deck works the same way. When we receive a power-up, we just draw a card and we can upgrade 1 or 2 or sometimes even 3 of our parameters of our stats. A deck of cards which was also present in the Valley of the Dead King is the Circumstance deck of cards. Those are events which will be activated each turn, and those events can be of different types. We can run into some enemies which always have some vitals, so they have some number of health points, some energy. They grant some rewards if we happen to defeat them, and they have some capabilities activated during battles. Those can be also afflictions or events or some treasures which will help us in our journey. Now in the game we receive 2 figurines. The first one is our heroes figurine, which will be used during gameplay to travel, because in HEXplore we will travel as a group. We won't separate one from another. Even if we play, for instance, in a group of 5 players, we will be traveling together. And in order to track our movement, the movement of our group, we will be using this miniature. The second one is a citadel, where Adrimon is present. She lives in this citadel and she will await the heroes in this citadel unless we let Adrimon grow in power up to her 10th level. In such a case, she will finally teleport from her citadel in order to face the heroes during a final battle. In order to track some information on the game map, we will be using tokens, for instance destination tokens, for instance sentinel tokens, which will be placed on battle sites when Adrimon rises her power, and additional ones activated by events. We will be using an additional time which is called the Elowen Grove. This is a special magical place where we will be able to travel in order to exchange our magical's nature gathered during play to some magical items used to further rise our powers and to help us in our quest. We will be also using player mats, which will be associated to each player. Each player participating in the game at the game's start will randomly choose one of the 8 characters which are in this part of the HEXplore saga. For instance, the druid. Each character, as you can see, is also the game map. The game tile of each character, as you can see, is double-sided. On one side we can see how this character looks like, and the second one is the one which we will be using during gameplay. Here we will write our name, we will indicate our abilities, skills and vitals. Those parameters will be changing during game, and in order to track those changes we will be using dry erase markers. So each time a parameter changes, we just erase the previous information, the previous parameter, and we write the new one. That's a very fine solution. It helps to quickly track the information without adding additional bookkeeping to the players. We can also track our equipment, the gold which we are carrying. We also will be indicating the number of food rations transported during gameplay. A very important part is also the part with our special abilities. Each character will have 2 special abilities associated to the first and the second mastery. Those abilities will be activated most often during combat, but sometimes also outside of combat by using our energy. The second part of our character will be also the race card, because each time we will not only choose a character mat but also a race card, and this race card will first of all tell us who will be our favorite opponent. So this is the opponent against whom we will especially excel during battle. We will also have the information which stats will be further increased before game begins. We will also receive the information what will be our food rating, so how much food we will be needing each turn in order to survive. And finally, each race card will add a special ability, which will be one of our abilities which will be used during gameplay. So actually we will have 3 special abilities, 2 from the character card and 1 additional from the race card. Additional mats used during play will be also the battle mat, on which we will be tracking the information about the vitals of the opponents we will be facing. We will be also able to track information about our group purchases, about the escorts, favors, about some relic wielder requirements, etc. etc. A very important part of this mat will be also the place where we will be tracking the Adrimon's upgrade, because she will at the end of each turn upgrade herself. She will rise into power, and her level can be increased if this circle is fully accomplished. Additional mats will include a mat where we can see how enthralled cities work, where we can see how battle against sentinels look like. We will also be able to track the game turn by reading the different steps of a turn. We will also be able to see how battle sites work, etc. etc. All the equipment found in the Elowen's Grove or in wayposts. Additional mats will also include bosses, because during gameplay we will face not only opponents coming from the circumstance deck, we will be also facing bosses. If we travel to a boss location, we can fight such a boss. Each boss, as you can see, has its own level. It has a certain amount of health points, of energy, and it has also some special abilities activated during a battle. Additionally, defeating such an enemy will grant us benefits. If the level of such a boss is close to 10, the rewards will be very high. The final opponent will be Adrimon herself. As you can see, no reward here, because defeating Adrimon means that we have achieved victory in the entire game. But look at the parameters, she is really powerful. As you can see, here we have also the symbol of some relics, which means that reforging such a relic will grant us special benefits against specific capabilities of Adrimon. The 2 final components, apart some dice which will be used during gameplay to test our skills, to roll for circumstance, to roll for nature, etc., are the 2 documents. The first one is the rulebook. The rulebook is very similar to the one found in the Valley of the Dead King. It's, as you can see, a rulebook made in color with a lot of text, but also with a lot of examples. It has also an index at the end, so it is very easy to find the information that you are looking for during gameplay. I like it very much. It's very well written. I had no doubt how to play the game after reading it. The second one, which was absent in the first edition of the Valley of the Dead King, but it was added in the second one, is the storybook. Now this is a nice addition because it adds a storytelling element to the game. It will enable us not only to live the adventure on the board thanks to the cards, but also thanks to some additional text, because each time we run into a boss, each time we cross the limits of an enthralled city, each time we enter a battle site, we can search the information about such a location, such a character in this storybook, and we can read aloud those information. So this is something which additionally increases this narrative, which was already high in the Valley of the Dead King and in the HEXplore saga. Here, thanks to the storybook, it is even stronger. Now, this was a brief look at all the components of HEXplore, the Forests of Adrimon. Now let's pass on to a short explanation of how a game turn of HEXplore works. The objective in Forests of Adrimon is to defeat Adrimon. So the entire game will be about upgrading our statistics, about cooperation inside the group in order to acquire some powerful items, some equipment, which will help us in the ultimate fight against Adrimon. Adrimon is a very powerful opponent, so we shouldn't try to attack her from the beginning, because such a decision will almost certainly or certainly end in failure. We should upgrade our stats. We should first of all explore and try to find some interesting places on the board before tackling Adrimon. Now, how a game turn of HEXplore, the Forests of Adrimon, works. A classical turn is divided into a few phases. Those phases are described on the game turns chart, so it is a good idea to have this chart in front of you during each play so that you can easily see what to do in each of those 5 phases. Before the game begins, we place the citadel on the board, so we verify which of the 6 cities on the board, of the 5 cities on the board, had been enthralled by Adrimon and occupied by her citadel. If we also want to start the game quickly, we have to choose our characters, our character cards, or we can also choose them randomly. We also choose one race card and we prepare our character. We write our stats, which will be first of all a combination of the parameters on our roll card and on our race card, so that we also receive additional abilities. Some abilities will require us to write some information on our card. So the dry erase marker will become your best friend for the entire game of the Forests of Adrimon. We also randomly choose our starting city, which we can loot at the beginning. Why to do so? Well, first of all, because looting a city enables us to find equipment and to upgrade our statistics, because as you can see, each of those gears can be upgraded. The information inside the hexagon is the information about our current statistics, but each time we happen to find an upgrade, we can increase our parameters. We can do so in many ways. If some encounters tell us to increase our parameters, we can do it. If we draw power-up cards, we can increase the corresponding parameter. But another way very common in the first opus of HEXplore, so in the Valley of the Dead King, was upgrading geothanks to gold. And this is a major change in this second part of the Forests of Adrimon, because this possibility is still in the game, but before we can upgrade our parameters thanks to gold, we first of all have to create a workshop. Now, in order to do so, we have to gather to acquire 3 workshop supplies, and this won't be so easy. We have to find wayposts where such upgrades can be bought, or we can eventually try to acquire them through some encounters. Until we create our workshop, which will receive a special token placed somewhere on the map, we cannot upgrade our statistics in the usual standard way that we all used in the first part of HEXplore. Now, after looting the city, so when we have already received some upgrades, some useful equipment, we can start playing. A game of HEXplore is being played in a series of turns, and as I said, each turn will be played in a very specific way. Now, the first thing that is done during each turn is movement, and here we can choose between 4 types of movement. We can first of all decide to camp, so to stay where we were. If we decide to do so, we will be able to regain some health and energy, because during gameplay we will lose health and energy due to combats, due to events, or due to some encounters. If we decide to camp, we can receive 3 points of health and energy. Additionally, we also discard the circumstance card, which is verified in phase 3 if we do not like it. The second way to move is move cautiously. Moving cautiously means that we move our group only 1 hex, or we move alongside a river and or a road. If we move alongside a road, we can move up to 4 hexes and it will still be cautious movement. Cautious movement is very important because moving cautiously also enables us to discard the circumstance card, and some of those circumstance cards will be really nasty. The third way to move is to just move at a normal speed, which is 4 hexes per game turn at the game's start. But moving so not alongside a road or a river, 1, 2, 3, 4, means we moved 4 hexes, but this is not cautious movement, so we won't have the comfort to discarding a circumstance card if it happens to be a bad card for the group. Finally, the last type of movement, used very rarely but sometimes also very useful, is reckless movement. Reckless movement enables us to move 2 hexes further than normal, but it's considered a forced march, so each hero will suffer 2 energy drain. Additionally, we will have some difficulties during our skill tests. So those are the types of movement. Why do we move? Well, we move to discover new locations. We move to acquire equipment. We move to defeat some bosses, or to try to accomplish destinations somewhere along the board. Now, moving to the edge of the board enables us also to explore the unknown territory, which is farther. When we do so, we can grab a random tile and add it to the world in the way that we want it. So, for instance, we can discover a tile with a waypost, and we can keep moving if we still have some movement points left. This is also a way to discover new places where new destinations should be accomplished, because, as I have already shown you, the destination cards have a certain letter on them, and at the game's beginning, for instance, the tile N will not be part of the known world. We have to discover it in order to accomplish such a destination. So the more tiles we discover, the more tiles we place on the game map, the more possibilities we have to accomplish additional destinations. The second phase is the skill phase, and this is the phase where we will have to roll some dice. Each player receives 3 skill dice, and each player will roll those dice during each turn. Those results are compared to our current stats, and in order to obtain a success, we have to roll equal or less than our parameter. So for instance, in order to successfully roll an explore result, we have to roll 3 or less if our current explore stat is 3. Now, what those things can give us? If we succeed a navigation roll, we avoid getting lost, because if we moved normally or recklessly, we can get lost. In order to avoid this, at least half of the group has to succeed our navigation roll. If we fail, we will wander and we will be displaced in a random direction. Exploration, so the yellow die, will enable us to find gold somewhere hidden alongside our road. If we do not succeed in such a test, nothing bad happens. The last die, the blue one, is the survival die, and this one will be important especially to players whom characters need to eat some food, because almost every character has a certain amount of food which needs to be consumed each turn in order to function normally. If we succeed our survival roll, we just find the food alongside the road. If we fail, we have to nourish ourselves with our food reserves which we can transport. If we happen not to have any reserves, we can still trade with other players, but if we do not have, the entire group doesn't have any food, well, we will start starving, and starving means bad things. It is also possible to roll a hex on each die, and that's the special result. That's a critical success. A critical success will enable us to harvest nature's essence. It will also enable us to, for instance, heal some lost health, etc., etc. So in general, this result will always be the better result whenever we roll a die. The third phase is the circumstance phase, when we will be looking at the circumstance cards alongside the top of the playing area, and we will randomly choose one of those circumstance cards. Now this phase is skipped if we end our movement on a special place, for instance in an enthralled city, a battle site, or a boss. If we don't, we have to play the circumstance phase, and playing the circumstance phase means we roll the 6-sided die which will tell us which circumstance we should play. If we moved cautiously, we can discard the thing that we happen to encounter if we do not want to play this card. But if this is a positive card, we will obviously play such a card in order to obtain its bonuses. Now, as I already explained, there are several types of circumstance cards, and sometimes we will have to fight against an opponent. Each opponent will have a certain amount of health, of energy, which such an opponent will be using during battles. When a battle is being fought, each character will declare one of their actions. Those actions can be an attack, a defense, which also enables us to use one piece of our equipment, or to use a special ability, so the first or the second mastery. Sometimes we will also be able to activate other abilities if we happen to possess equipment or additional capabilities which enable us to do so. When each player had declared their actions, we roll a 6-sided die to verify what thing will do our opponent. And as you can see, a 1-3 up here will mean an attack, a 4-5 will mean an energy attack, and a hex will mean a deadly dual target health attack. So at that point, rolling a hex is the least expected result, because it means that our opponent will launch a very powerful attack. Sometimes those attacks will target one character, sometimes this will be a group attack, so it will target each and every member of the group, and each member of the group who didn't block, so who didn't use his defend ability, will have to lose some health. This health is being subtracted from his current parameters, so is the energy amount which a character can possess. The number of points equal to our attack parameters will be the sum of the attack and to the damage which will be subtracted from the health of our opponent. We will be sometimes using the battle mat in order to keep track of the current health and energy, or the soul shield of our opponent. Some opponents are soul shielded, which means that before taking their health we have to take down their shield. Some others will have some influence, which means that healing such opponents enables us to unchain them from the power of Adrimon, and they can become our allies. During battles we will activate some special conditions, some special abilities. Each character has some additional capabilities which can be used inside or outside of combat. That's the most fun part of HEXplore, because you always have to carefully read your capabilities in order to know when and how to use them to help you and your colleagues during battles and during gameplay. Now, after defeating an enemy, you also receive some rewards. Those rewards can be food, gold, and sometimes also magical nature, which will help us to trade with Elowen. Elowen was a dryad living in the forest before Adrimon took possession of this forest, and if we gather enough points or magical points, we can use them in Elowen's growth to acquire some very neat potions or magical objects. After the circumstance phase, we pass on to the event phase, which is a phase during which we will verify the results of the visit of our party in special places. So this phase will be played if we skip the circumstance phase. So if we ended the movement, for instance, on a boss site, on a battle site, we will just apply the rules corresponding to such a place. So this is the moment when we can search for gear in the cities, where we can fight bosses, so the opponents of higher levels, where we can visit wayposts. It's also the moment when we can try to accomplish destinations, and those destinations, as I said, are placed randomly on the board thanks to cards drawn from the deck. We can also accomplish them, for instance, by successfully passing some skill rolls or by defeating opponents, etc., etc. Accomplishing destinations enables us to acquire some fragments of the relics, which furthermore will enable us to then reforge such relics and to acquire them on battle sites. It's very important to acquire those big artifacts, because they will help us greatly in our quest of defeating Adrimon. Those objects are really invaluable. After those phases, we pass on to the final phase, which is the villain phase, where Adrimon normally can act. Now, during the play, the activity of Adrimon will be really minimal, and this activity will most often be just upgrading herself, so increasing her power. We will be augmenting her power by 1 each turn. If we write 6 spaces, we upgrade the power of Adrimon and we restart counting. When we arrive at 10, Adrimon will automatically attack the players, so that's all the time that we have to prepare for this battle. But there is also one additional tweak. When Adrimon upgrades herself, when she acquires a new level, a new sentinel is being placed onto the map, and those sentinels will occupy battle sites, which are very important places because those are the only places where relics can be reforged. And those sentinels additionally have a power which is related to the current level of Adrimon. So if we let them develop too much, their power will be really high because they will have 16 points of energy, but they, as you can see, will be soul shielded with a big health which will be related to the current level of Adrimon. For a level 4 Adrimon will grant a sentinel 24 points of health. Now after the villain phase we restart a new turn, during which we will once more move our group, during which we will once more browse through the circumstance cards, during which we will try to accomplish additional quests, upgrade our gear, etc, etc. It's all about upgrading, it's all about accomplishing new missions, about defeating bosses and preparing ourselves for the final battle. Now the final battle is just like other battles. We will choose our actions. Adrimon will play a random action. Using some relics will diminish the powers of those abilities, or they will enable us to inflict more damage to the magi. If we manage to defeat her, the game ends in victory. If we are slain, we just lose the game. It's also possible during gameplay to lose our hero but to be revived, so it is possible to die but to become an active player again if our fellow players manage to bring to resuscitate us. Now what is also very important is that during gameplay we will be racing against time, because the power of Adrimon will sometimes influence the capabilities of the players. Each time Adrimon's power increases, we will also check if her power is equal or greater than the skills of the players. If, for instance, Adrimon had 3 points of power, she would instantly block the explore parameter of my hero, and each time I would have to roll the die, I would automatically fail such a test. If all my 3 skills were equal or less than the current level of Adrimon, my hero becomes mind wiped and I lose the game automatically. I cannot help my fellow players. If in some way our other players manage to increase my stats, I can still continue playing, but this will not be easy. So this will all be a race against time. Now those are the basic elements, the basic ideas of how a game of HEXplore, the Forests of Adrimon works. Now I would like to pass to a conclusion and to tell you what I think about this game, about its strong and a little bit weaker points. During my review of the Valley of the Dead King, I have already said twice, because I reviewed this game twice, that I love the system, that I love the HEXplore setting, the HEXplore mechanisms, and so my reviews of the first edition of the Valley of the Dead King were positive ones, were very enthusiastic ones. My major concern when it came to Forests of Adrimon was that this game will be repetitive, that this game will be a clone of the first edition. And I think, but many gamers, many people who already played the Valley of the Dead King had the same concerns. And it deserves to be mentioned at the beginning of this conclusion that this is not the case. The second edition of the Valley of the Dead King and the Forests of Adrimon are two very different games, and that's a fantastic thing. So the Forests of Adrimon are played in a different way. We receive new mechanisms, we receive a complete new storyline, we receive new elements, so this game is really something apart. And this is a major point which deserves to be mentioned at the beginning. So what are the strong points of this edition and what are the weaker points? First of all, the same thing which applies to the Valley of the Dead King is a major strong point of this game, the quality of the elements. What we receive in this game is really of a very high quality. I already said during my review of the Valley of the Dead King that I rarely see games with such a high standard of the components, and the same applies to the Forests of Adrimon because the standard is the same. So the board tiles, the character cards, the cards, the tokens, everything that you use in this game are really fantastic, are really terrific and gorgeous to look at. Additionally, they are very functional, which means that during gameplay you absolutely have no doubt what to use, how to use it, how to read the text. I have found zero typos on the cards, on the character boards, and this means that the game had really been well prepared before being published. That's a big thumb up to Mariucci Jane Designs because they have done excellent work preparing this game, and the proofreading had been exceptional. The second thing is that, as it was in the Valley of the Dead King, we receive a great mix of character and race cards. So each game will be played differently because HEXplore is all about character development. It's all about increasing your stats, using your capabilities. And in the Valley of the Dead King, as it is in the Forests of Adrimon, you really should well understand how to use your character, because not all of the characters will be used in the same way. Some will be better while attacking, some will be defending, some will be utilities, some will be supporting characters, and knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses is the key to be a strong point of the group. So this difference between characters, between races, means that each time you play a new game, each time you live a new adventure, this adventure will develop in a different way, because each time you can also decide to upgrade your capabilities, your abilities in a different way. You can, for instance, try to play the same character in two different ways. The abilities will be the same, but your stats will differentiate your style of play. Forests of Adrimon is much more different, is very different from the Valley of the Dead King, because in the Valley of the Dead King we already had the Dead King on the board from the game's start, or somewhere from turn 2, 3 or 4, and you really felt this race against the clock. In Forests of Adrimon it's still a race against the clock, but it is more subtle because Adrimon is not present on the board, you have only her citadel, and sometimes you might feel that the danger is somewhere very far from you, but in fact Adrimon is upgrading herself, she becomes stronger with each turn. Additionally, this race against time is well seen when the parameters of Adrimon increase, because if she increases at a level higher than your skills, you become mind wiped. So the game can end very quickly if you do not focus on upgrading some skills. What I really like is also the fact that we have a different approach to gear upgrades, because here you have to acquire workshop supplies in order to create your own workshop. cities work in a different way, so those two games work very differently. I love the idea with the relics, with the fragments which you have to gather in order to reforge those relics, and it is absolutely worth the time and the effort to do so, because all of those relics are really very powerful weapons, especially against Adrimon. So those different things make for the Forests of Adrimon work very differently from the Valley of the Dead King. And if I had to say if I preferred the first or the second edition, I would say that they are so different one from another when it comes to the narrative and the way to play them, that I would say both are extremely good. What I really like is that this is a game in which you really feel your character development. There are some games in which you have just, for instance, 3-4 stats, you increase those stats, but in reality you have only one special ability where, for instance, you have a +1 to your attack parameter, and while playing your adventure you do not have this feeling that you develop a character, that you live an adventure. Here in HEXplore, character development is crucial. It's all about character development, and you have so many stats, so many very complicated capabilities that you really feel this development. Each time you increase, for instance, one of your parameters, this one will not only influence this parameter, this stat, but it will also influence, for instance, one of your masteries. So those correlations, those synergies between the capabilities of players and among your group means that each time you will carefully have to plan and decide what to invest, how to increase your stats. And I love this thing. I like the fact that you still have this narrative potential in this game, because in the first edition of the Valley of the Dead King it was an adventure game, but the narrative was somewhere farther. Here it's very well underlined, especially thanks to the additional booklet which is being added to the game. So I already said during the review of the second edition of the Valley of the Dead King that this additional booklet where this role-playing approach can shine was a fantastic idea, and the same applies to the Forests of Adrimon. The decision to add this booklet meant that players who like to play games in a more narrative way, who like role-playing games, will really enjoy this game a lot, because you can tailor the game to your own needs. If you want a faster game, you can completely omit this role-playing addition. If you want a much more narrative experience, you can add it. The gameplay will be maybe longer, but the narrative experience will be significantly better. So what are the weaker points of this part of the HEXplore saga? Well, I would say that the first one is the same that in the Valley of the Dead King. You still have to roll a lot of dice. In fact, because in this game we find a new die, the fate die, you will roll the dice even more often than in the first edition. Is this a bad thing? Well, I would say that the fact that you keep rolling dice is something that will not suit every player. Some players are allergic to dice rolling, and here you will roll them constantly. So this might be a problem for people who do not like it. It deserves to be mentioned that those dice rolls are mitigated, because you still have the possibility to increase your stats. Seeing your weaknesses, seeing your strong points, you will be able to decide which stats to upgrade, in which invest. So investing in those stats means that later during the game your skill rolls will be much more easier. So this is also a question of decisions. Still, there's a problem concerning quests or destinations, as we call it in this edition, because at the game's start you will randomly choose those destinations, and you still can have destinations which are to be accomplished on tiles which are not part of the starting world. It's not a huge problem, because additionally in this edition you draw 2 destinations per relics, so you will start with 8 destinations. That's a lot. And so this means that the probability that each of those destinations will be apart from the ABCD tiles means it is much more smaller than it was in the Valley of the Dead King, but it still can happen. The third thing is that, in my opinion, the game difficulty is not the same when you play in a group of 2, 3 or even 6 persons. It becomes much easier while playing in a larger group, because when you draw an opponent, if you face a boss during combat, their strength is not associated to the number of players in the game. So their energy, their health will be the same if you face them in a group of 2 or 4 or 6 players. This means that larger groups will have easier plays. Of course, the game mechanisms state that you can increase the difficulty level each time you think you should do it, and so the health points and the difficulty will increase according to the number of players in the game. But it's not the game which suits, it's not the game which accommodates to the current levels of the players. It's up to the players to change the game. So it's totally up to the players to decide if they want to change the difficulty level. In some games, it's the game which increases its difficulty level by itself, and the players just have to cope with it. Here, it's up to the players, and I would prefer that it would be the game and not the players which increases its difficulty level by itself. It would, in my opinion, work more smoothly, and it would be more logical, because here it's the burden of the decision is being transferred to the players. So I want to win, or if I want to lose, I want to have a challenging game. Yes, I want, but it's up to me to decide which level will be the most appropriate. I would prefer that the game decided it by itself. Having said that, I believe that this part of the HEXplore installment is a fantastic one. I love the theme, I love the artwork, I love the narrative, I love the gameplay. This is just a fantastic game which you definitely should try. Thank you for watching this review. This was a review of the Forests of Adrimon, the second part in the HEXplore saga. I will present you also the review of the Return to the Forests of Adrimon, so of the expansion, in some time. Up until then, I hope you will have a fantastic day, week, month to come. Visit our other materials. We have some unboxings, so reviews. Have a fantastic day and see you next time.